There's a root beneath your feet that's been quietly shaping human history for thousands of years. Crisp, peppery, fiery, and sometimes surprisingly sweet. Not only has it fed people, it has been used as currency and carved into intricate works of art. This little cousin of wasabi is so easy to grow. They'll go from a seed packet to your lunch plate in a month. Today, we're digging into the unexpected story of the radish.
Every spring, I have this moment where I look at my freshly planted garden and think, this is it. I've finally figured it out. Fast forward 6 weeks, my spinach has bolted, my peas have disappeared, and my zucchini is aggressively thriving. And that's when it hits. Gardens aren't meant to peak once. They're meant to evolve over time. Today, we're diving into succession planting, how to keep your vegetable garden productive and your perennial beds looking incredible from early spring all the way to frost.
Hello and welcome to the Petal Plot Pod, a seasonal plant stories and garden tips podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Aneesa.
And I'm Eric.
Long before radishes showed up sliced neatly into salads or perched on a plate as garnish, they were a staple of survival. Let's go back over 4,000 years to ancient Egypt. Radishes weren't just food. Workers building the pyramids were reportedly paid in radishes, along with onions and garlic. Not exactly a modern paycheck, but those pungent roots were valued for their ability to provide quick energy and sustain labor in brutal conditions. In ancient Greece, radishes were so respected that they were offered to the gods, not casually either. Gold replicas of radishes were presented at temples. That's right, somewhere in history, someone thought this vegetable deserves to be immortalized in gold. Eric, if you could immortalize a plant in gold because you see it as incredibly valuable to your life, what would it be?
Oh my gosh. Okay.
I know, it's a big question.
That is a big question because in my mind, I'm like, I think there's several of them that I'd put in that category. Okay. I think my go-to, invaluable, I think I would say the blueberry bush. I feel like you get the fruit, and then there's like the fall color. I even think the spring leaves when they start to pop out are pretty. I feel like, I don't know, I like anything that I think has multi-purpose to it in the garden, right?
Oh, that's such a good answer. That's such a good answer. Yeah, I was sort of thinking of any plant in my life, and I was like, what plant do I use the most? And I
Yeah.
think it's the lemon. So I was thinking like lemons. Like I would
I mean, they're already yellow, gold. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. That's funny. I know. I feel like I'd put so many things in that category. Technically, if you ask, it's almost like asking what's your favorite plant. I probably chose something that was like practical in the moment. But I mean, I would choose irises. I would choose peonies. I would choose roses and salvia and grasses and bulbs and pretty much everything I'd be naming up. Japanese maples, evergreens. Um, so there'd be a
Everything
lot of
gets
things in gold.
everything gets dipped in gold.
Yep.
As plants do, radishes traveled with people across the world, spreading across Asia and Europe and over to the Americas. In China and Japan, they evolved into entirely different forms, larger, milder, and often sweeter. This is where we meet the daikon, a long white radish that can grow to impressive sizes and plays a central role in many dishes. Meanwhile, in Europe, radishes became a seasonal favorite, especially in spring, when fresh vegetables were scarce after long winters. Their fast-growing nature made them one of the earliest harvests of the year. In Mexico, every year on December 23rd, the city of Oaxaca transforms into something surreal. It's called La Noche de los Rabanos, the Night of the Radishes. Legend has it, the event began one year in the mid-18th century when radish crops were so abundant a section lay unharvested for months. Two friars pulled up some of these forgotten radishes. The sizes and shapes were amusing, and they brought them as curiosities to the Christmas market held on December 23rd. These misshapen vegetables attracted attention, and soon they began to be carved to give them a wider variety of shapes and figures. This eventually turned into an official annual competition that continues today. Farmers grow special radishes just for this event. Oversized, oddly shaped, sometimes weighing several pounds. These aren't your typical salad radishes. They're bred and cultivated specifically for carving, thick, dense, and dramatic. Over the years, various types of radishes have been used. A large, completely white type called a Creole was used earlier, as it did not rot as readily and adopted a more capricious form. While this variety has since disappeared entirely, an image of them can still be seen in a work by Diego Rivero, Las Tentaciones de San Antonio. The formal Noche de Rabanos competition focuses on the carving of radishes, which can also be embellished with other elements. Most entries are scenes that use multiple radishes, with the most traditional being nativity scenes. However, over the 100+ years that the competition has been held, there has been significant diversification in the entries. You can find common scenes related to life in Oaxaca, such as posadas and calendas, Dia de los Muertos, Danza de la Pluma, Oaxacan history and folklore, as well as Our Lady of Guadalupe, and sometimes protest art. The most common elements are people, animals, food, and handcrafts of the state, as well as snowmen, monsters, and which are like house gnomes or tontas. Eric, do
Mhm.
you have any Scandinavian ancestry?
Yeah, I am Norwegian,
Oh,
so very heavy
Norwegian.
Norwegian family. Yes.
Yeah, so in Norway, they would call them nissa. But they're
Oh.
basically so in Swedish tradition, they're called
Hmm.
tomtas, and they're
Yeah.
basically like house and yard gnomes, and that can be really
Okay.
helpful or mischievous. I actually have
Oh.
a spot in my house for them, and when Kata was little, I encouraged this folklore, so if we ever lost anything, it was because the tomtas took it, and we had to go leave them a present, like little coins or little
Oh.
candies, and then they would, like, become happier with us, and then they would reveal it so we could go find it.
Yeah.
So I think that's similar to what the duendes are.
Yeah.
Um
That's super interesting. I feel like we didn't have. I'm gonna because I grew up in the '80s, so I feel like we I never heard that as a story like just from my Norwegian grandma or anything like that. But I do feel like we had a story where my sister had a bunch of the trolls, if you will. If you were born
Oh,
in the
yeah.
'80s,
Mhm,
with the crazy hair and everything. And it's probably not the same thing, but in my mind.
mhm.
But we'd always make fun of when things were gone that one of the trolls had taken it. So
See,
maybe
it
and
was in your
symbolically,
DNA.
yeah, it was in my DNA already thinking of it. But I was thinking of the '80s with the really cool hair
Oh,
trolls,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
what's happening. But I love that you created the folklore within your home and actually a space where they were.
Yeah, yeah, I can show it to you. Yeah, I didn't grow up with this tradition, but I learned about it as an adult, so I thought that it would be
Mhm.
a fun thing to grow up with, you know?
Yeah.
I also have one out by my sauna in Finnish tradition, they're called tantus, so I
Ah,
have one out there too as well.
got it. They're everywhere.
Okay, back to Oaxaca. Originally, the radishes used by competitors were those raised by local farmers. But as the city has grown, the government has stepped in and allocated land for their cultivation, specially grown for the event. The artists, some formally trained, many self taught, spend months preparing. But here's the catch they only have a few hours to carve their designs before judging begins. Why? Because once radishes are harvested and cut, they begin to wilt, dry, and lose their structure very quickly. Timing and precision is everything. By nightfall, thousands gather to walk through the displays. It's vibrant, chaotic, and fleeting. And by the next day, it's gone. The radishes collapse, dry out, and return briefly to the earth they came from. But they come as quickly as they go. If there's any plant that rewards you quickly, it's the radish. You don't need a farm or even a yard. You can grow them in a pot. You don't need perfect conditions, but there are a few important factors to consider. One, timing is everything. Radishes thrive in cool weather, so the early spring and fall are ideal. In hot weather, they can become woody and tough and overly spicy. If you're in a place like Minnesota, you have two narrow but perfect windows right after the soil thaws and again as temperatures cool in the fall. Soil itself is pretty important too. Loose, well drained soil is critical. Radishes grow underground, so if the soil is compacted or full of rocks, you'll get stunted and misshapen roots. The ground in Minnesota does often have clay in it, so you may need to stir some compost into the ground if you're planting directly. You want the soil to be soft and crumbly and easy to push your hands into. Radishes also don't like to be transplanted or moved, so you want to sow the seeds directly into the ground or into a container. Water should be consistent. Inconsistent watering leads to cracking, bitterness, or hollow centers, so keep the soil evenly moist, not soaked, and not dry. Harvest will happen kind of fast. Radishes are going to be ready quickly, often in 3 to 4 weeks. If you leave them in the ground too long, they'll become woody and lose that crisp bite. So after about 3 weeks, pull one out, do a taste test, and then do that test every few days until they seem just right. Radishes are great companions in the garden. They can help break up soil for slower growing crops like carrots. You can eat more than just the root. The greens are also edible. They're kind of peppery and really good sauteed. If a radish bolts, meaning that if it starts to flower, you can still use it. The seed pods are also edible and surprisingly tasty. Do you grow radishes in your garden, Eric?
I do, because they're super easy and quick to grow. So they're kind of, we'll talk about this in succession planning, but they're an easy one to just kind of put in between and get a quick produce in between. Yeah. But you were talking about the seeds. I've never tried eating the seeds.
I haven't either, actually. Maybe that'll
Hmm.
be a goal for this year. Try some radish seeds.
Yeah. But do you grow different types of radishes? Because I feel like there's a lot of different um, varieties and types that you
Mhm.
can get too, rather than maybe what we think is just a traditional radish. And
Mhm.
I feel like some of those will have different flavors, which I think is worth trying. With maybe you don't like the super peppery taste, maybe that some radishes seem to have.
Mhm.
There's ones I think that can be a little more sweeter too.
Definitely. And some are really pretty. Like some come in these really pretty purples and kind of streaky
Yeah,
colors. Yeah, they
right.
can be really beautiful. Yeah, and if you want to try to grow milder radishes on purpose, grow them fast and early. Any kind of stress or heat or drought or crowding will make them sharper and spicier, which
Hmm.
is why when you buy radishes at the store, you might notice sometimes they are more or less spicy, just depended on what the conditions were like when they were growing.
Interesting.
Radishes are rich in vitamin C. They help support digestion and contain compounds that have been studied for their anti inflammatory and detoxifying effects. Historically, they've been used in traditional medicine from treating coughs to aiding liver function, and because they're mostly water, they're incredibly hydrating, crisp little reservoirs of freshness. So, on one hand, they're simple, affordable, easy to grow in a backyard or a container on a balcony. And on the other hand, they've also become a favorite of chefs, being roasted, pickled, fermented, or served just with butter and salt. Do you have a favorite way of preparing radishes, Eric?
I think I just eat them straight out of the garden. I don't know. Maybe a
Mm.
time or two we've just like sauteed them a little bit
Mhm.
with some other vegetables, but usually I feel like I've only eaten them fresh, and I don't grow a ton of them, so it's kind of one of those things I enjoy just having straight out of the garden. What
Mhm.
about you?
Yeah, same. I feel almost a bit lazy after thinking about all the ways that chefs were
Yeah,
making their radishes, but yeah, I usually just eat them raw. I have
yeah,
some in the fridge right now, actually. I feel a little inspired to maybe pickle them. Make some pickled
yeah.
radishes.
Oh, I bet you that would be good.
That would be good.
Yeah. The other thing I was gonna say, you talked about this early on too, with like using it and decorating with it. When I lived in Thailand for a little bit, I took a cooking class, and there I learned to carve vegetables and fruit into flowers and things. And I know radishes was
Yeah.
definitely one of those I was making roses out of. So,
For sure, that's so fun. That just unlocked a memory for me that I taught a
mm,
food art class one time, and we would make
hmm,
art out of food, and not in, like, a professional chef way. It was really
yeah,
just, like, you're using food instead of another material, but,
oh, cool.
yeah, okay, I can totally see it now. I might have to bring those skills back. Surprise at dinner. Like
Yeah. fancy garnishes?
Mm-hmm. So, if you plant one thing this season, make it a radish. Watch how quickly it grows, watch how quickly it changes, and don't wait too long to enjoy it. You'll be tasting something that fed pyramid builders, inspired artists, and traveled the world one root at a time.
So, today we're talking about the succession mindset. And so, succession planting isn't just a technique, it's really kind of a mind shift. So, instead of asking, what am I planting? You start asking, like, what's happening here next? And so, you start to think in three different layers, like timing of plants. Is it early, mid, late, and beyond? Replacement, what fills the gap when something's done? And then structure, like what keeps things grounded and remains throughout the whole season, possibly. So, um, the one thing I feel like we hear a lot is just, people talking about, I plant everything in the spring and then I'm done, right? And that's kind of really just like one act play. And we're really aiming here to think of like full season of time to kind of fill your garden. So, Anissa, do you do succession planning in your own garden?
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. One of my favorite things to grow is garlic. And I really like growing garlic because I like making a garlic braid, like you see hanging in an Italian restaurant.
Yeah.
I love having a
Yeah.
homegrown garlic braid in my kitchen
Yep.
throughout the winter, and so I do garlic, and then, of course, that's one of the first things to come up. But as soon as that's done and I harvest it, I have all this space in my garden. So I Last year, I did sweet
Mhm.
peas. Got a couple different types of sweet peas to grow to see how they compare next to each other. And yeah, there's just so
Yeah.
much space that we can keep growing on.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, especially for if you live in urban areas, I feel like you many times don't have a lot of space. So, the ground you are using for vegetable gardening or flower gardening or what have you, like, is at a premium. So it's kind of like you want to also think how can you take advantage of what you have. So, succession planning really kind of helps, get that full produce amount or color amount out of your gardens. And doesn't necessarily take a lot more effort in some cases. I know I grow a lot of like salads and things early in the season, but right after that I start planting in some other root crops or a tomato or beans or things like that. And even in that, sometimes you realize maybe once a bean has like produced, you can actually plant it right away again and get more beans. It's not one and done necessarily, or one and done. If you're tired and you don't want to do any more garden work and you're satisfied, then that's fine too. So, so first of all, I thought I'd talk one about like vegetables and then we'll talk about perennials because I think succession planning really happens in both. And so we're trying to appease both audiences out there, but vegetable gardens are where succession planting kind of gives you the biggest return and also where people leave probably even the most opportunity on the table. Kind of think of it as like spring crops, summer crops, and then like a fall round where you also can do more planting. And so spring crops, that cool season, plants like lettuce, spinach, arugula, radishes, as we talked today, peas, carrots, beets, broccoli. There's a lot that they're very fast growing and productive. And then they also fade away when the sun and the heat starts hitting for us in about probably mid-June or so. And then your summer transition, you're swapping out with things like your tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, zucchinis, beans, like we talked about, some of your herbs, basil. That's why we talk about tomatoes and peppers and things being started early indoors. And then you kind of go through another period where the ground is nice and warm, and we're going to enter into a cool down, right? There's a lot of like repeat friendly type things like lettuce, beans, like I said, herbs, radishes. And then there's like other crops that are kind of like one and done. At least for us here, you probably would say like your tomatoes and peppers tend to be like a one and done. You might
Mhm.
not get much more because once we start to cool down, they start to slow down as well.
Mhm.
But other one and dones, think of like corn, probably for us, cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower. It's kind of like once they're done, you're probably not going to get another crop of that. And I think that's worth noting when you're planning out your garden, because to me, those are things that are taking up space. And I need to allow it to be there the whole time. And I say that because some people I know get excited. I'm sure here in Minnesota, we think of like, ooh, corn. That's really cool, but it actually takes up a lot of space in your garden unless you start interplanting some other things to kind of just work with it. But it's going to light and nutrients from your gardens.
And I think too with corn, I haven't grown corn in a very long time, but,
Mm,
in the city, I feel like everyone that grows corn at some point, like, it looks perfect, it looks beautiful, the cobs, look like they're
mm.
almost ready to be harvested, and then squirrels just destroy it, one night, and then you
Yeah,
wake up and it's gone, and you have nothing. Like, you have to
this is
surround it
true.
by, like, a cage with including the
Yeah,
top to make it
yeah.
so that
For sure. And so I think of like also just sharing some smart succession combos in vegetables. So like when you grow your peas after they're done, cucumbers are great to throw in afterwards, nice and warm. Or from spinach to peppers, radishes, like we talked about, can even then be replaced by carrots afterwards. Lettuce to beans. So there's really kind of this like plan you can create to kind of maximize the space and produce that you would get. There's also a few things that have pretty shallow roots that if you grow them right next to other plants, why not utilize up the space as the other ones are growing on? There's a lot of like companion planting you can kind of do within that. Or, things that I feel like there's some things like I think of like pumpkins. Like when I plant those, I'm just waiting for that pumpkin to go and get ripe and I just leave it. And I probably don't do the best job of like maximizing space on it. Where other things I feel like I'll try to get at like lettuce, try to like squeeze it in as many times as I can until I need to like hold off during the heat of summer. And then I feel like in the fall, I jump into that practice again and I'm succession planning again.
You have me thinking because, I like to grow a lot of kale, and the kale I could
Yeah.
harvest throughout the entire season, as so I'll just pull the leaves off the bottom and then more leaves grow up the top, but then the plant starts to lean towards the light pretty,
Mm,
significantly, and then it will end up where the leaves are will end up being almost a foot away from the base where it was planted,
hmm.
and there is this whole open area, and I don't usually fill it with something, but now you're making me feel inspired to throw lettuce down there, in September or something like that. Because
Yeah.
I often think, I'm like, "Look at all this ground," like, it's just, like, sitting here while my
Yeah.
kale is moving around, and, yeah, throwing some lettuce in there, it's a great idea.
Prime real estate. The
Yeah.
other thing you made me think of in saying that, as some things get taller, bigger, sometimes just planting in the shade of those plants, like your lettuces and things could actually still grow in the heat of summer because they're nicely shaded and cooled by larger plants.
Oh, definitely.
So let's talk about our other topic, which is around perennials and flower gardens. And the nice thing with perennials and things, you don't have to keep putting seeds out there every year. You plant it once and it'll come back that way again every year. So first layer I'm going to hit obviously is bulbs and our ephemerals. So tulips, daffodils, alliums, Virginia bluebells, trilliums. These are kind of like always thinking of like the opening act, the early beautiful, and then they kind of disappear.
Mhm.
Right? And so they're a great way to add color early on in the season before really any of the other perennials really wake up or start leafing out.
Mhm.
Anissa, I don't know if you have things that come to mind that you're like, gosh, when that starts coming out of the ground, I actually love it, and that's not even like at its full peak, right? Like it's still going to keep growing or producing flowers, but just that emergence is really cool. Do you have things that you look forward to that come out of the ground like that?
Yeah, I think my favorite things to see come up are the early ones too, poppies and rhubarb, especially because I like the
Mm,
leaves. The poppy leaves are really pretty and frilly, and
yeah,
rhubarb, when it comes out of the ground, looks like a weird little brain. I just
it
and it's always
does.
like one of the first things, right? So I'm like, "It's happening,"
Yeah.
and it's so exciting to see it.
Yeah, I love that. I thought you were going to say, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would have said you are looking forward to the ferns and those fiddleheads coming out of the ground.
Ooh, yeah, that is also a good answer.
Okay.
Because those are really fun to see, and then to have for dinner.
Yeah. I also love, I think we've talked about this before, like peonies many times have like deep red shoots when they come out of the ground,
Oh,
which can be
yeah.
really striking against other tulips and things that are maybe already blooming. It's kind of this contrast. Or even like Baptisia has a really like thick structural growth and also sometimes a very dark coloring to it. Just another interest layer to think about in your garden that maybe if you don't have some of those specific plants might be worth growing because they kind of have this interest early on. So I'm going to break it out into rather than just spring, summer, and fall. I really think you start to have these micro seasons of just like multi spring, multi summer, and fall moments because most flowers really only bloom 2 to 4 weeks, maybe max for some really cool ones, but most are like 2 weeks and they're done. And so you really have like early spring with like your bulbs, hellebores, pasque flowers, brunnera. Mid late spring is kind of like bleeding heart, creeping phlox is fun, and your baptisia comes out. And then you start getting into summer. So then it's like early summer, salvias, geums, catmint, midsummer with our coneflowers and yarrow and bee balm. And then we're not even done with summer. We still have late summer, which kind of can pick up with liatris, the tall phlox, and helenium. And then we finally reach fall. So I feel like even talking through that, you realize how many different types of plants bloom really at very specific times versus saying, I have a spring, I have a summer, and I have a fall plant. And then obviously into like winter interest, which we've talked about here of just like, how do you have 4 seasons of interest? Our ornamental grasses and seed heads and other things that look really cool still through the winter. So you're not planting really for one moment. You're really designing kind of this timeline to go across all. Anissa, I talk about all this, and in my head, I was kind of like, gosh, how do you create that? What's like one thing, a small change someone could make this year that would like completely just improve their garden flow? Like it just seems like a lot to take in, but like where do you start?
Yeah, I think it can be really helpful to have a visual aid for this. So there are a lot
Yeah.
of really nice charts out there that map the months and then what plants bloom at what time, and being able to kind of see that, especially if you can draw on it, and then you can kind of like pick the plants that you want to have in your garden, and then plant them so that the goal then is to have that, continuously blooming garden, and even if you do a stellar job of that, you still might end up having these holes that, putting annuals is such a great idea to just get rid of little dead spaces here and there. Because
Yeah.
once if something comes up and crowds the annual out, like, that's fine. Like,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think it's like a continual plan that you work on, right? And I think it's never perfect. I mean, even in my own garden, I can think of spots that this year I'm taking one area and thinking, how do I add just a little more to it? Or remove some things where I just have too many things all happening at the same time and kind of do
Mhm.
some editing.
Mhm.
So, succession planting isn't about doing more. It's about thinking ahead just enough to keep your garden going. Start small, one crop, one section, one layer. And if your zucchini gets out of control, just know you're not alone. Anissa, do we have a garden question?
We do, we do. Alright, hold on, let me find it here. Okay. Daniel writes in and asks, I bought some astilbe roots that came in a bag of dirt. I've kept them inside so they don't freeze, but they started to sprout, and it's way too cold to plant them outside. What do I do to keep them alive? And will they flower at the right time if they are growing earlier than they would be outside right now?
Yeah, I mean, now's the time where many of us grab a lot of those, bulbs or tubers or what have you at the garden center, starts carrying things or other perennials you can buy as root plantings. And so I think it's perfectly fine to like pot them up and get them going. Maybe they might be out of succession with the rest of your garden. And obviously, if it's a little bit warmer, they may go to flower sooner. But I think it's okay because as soon as we're warm enough outside, you can go ahead and get it in the ground and get planted. And then next year, it'll go back in cycle, if you will. The other thing I was going to say, usually with those bare root plants is many times you can keep them in your refrigerator until it warms up a little bit and you want to maybe plant them up. And just make sure you don't have any like apples and other things, I think, next to it in your refrigerator because it gives off those gases that sometimes can affect other plants. So keep note of that. But that's probably what I would do. Yeah. What do you think, Anissa?
Yeah, I've made the mistake of just accidentally leaving something on the main floor where it's just too warm and light
Mm,
and, but just, bring them down into the basement. I just put stuff in the basement now too, so
yeah.
where it's cold and dark.
You grow too fast down in the basement to
Go to
you.
the basement.
Yeah. Well, and it's cooler there. It'll slow down the growth as well. And so yeah, if you have something like that, I would do the same. I mean, you could do the same in your if you have a unheated garage.
Mhm.
It's just avoid the freezing temps that would happen. Sometimes if you put your plants on cement, like in your garage that maybe isn't attached, be careful because it's more likely to freeze if it's touching the bottom of the cement. That's where the cold temperatures lie. So if you can like prop it up higher or put it up on a table or something so it's not on the cement.
If you have a gardening question you'd like us to answer, please write to us at petalandplot@gmail.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone you know and click the follow button to hear our next episode.
As garden designers here at Petal and Plot, we also offer year-round in-person and virtual gardening consultations and custom garden designs as well. Want to see more of what we're up to? Please follow us on Instagram at Petal and Plot. That's PETALNPLOT.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.